bands when they get to the Guildhall size. So when they're on a national playing field, somewhere in the mix of 8,000 to 10,000, like Ali Pally, why are people waiting until these bands get this big, until they're engaging?
Hi, and welcome to Promote the Hell Out of It. My name is Miz, and on the show, I talk to people worth promoting about subjects I think are worth talking about and telling other people about. This particular episode is one that is incredibly close to my heart. I talked to Ricky Bates, head of bookings and promotions for The Joiners. Now, The Joiners is a venue that is incredibly historical. It's been open for 50 years in Southampton, but also pivotal to my life. I've watched a lot of bands there that encouraged me to start my own band, to tour, and I've also met a lot of friends there. Ricky has also worked for the Common People Festival in Southampton as a festival programmer for Bestival. He's had experience with Groezrock Festival, and he is the owner of Wrong Way Round Promotions. So if you're into music, especially into the DIY or independent music scene, you'll probably know of The Joiners, and if not, know of Ricky himself. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's always important to talk to someone who has his experience about what can be done to fix the situation of the music scene, to fix the situation with venues shutting down all over the country. And it's an issue that isn't just based in the UK, but is nationwide and internationally happening. So, getting his opinion on what can be done to fix this issue, on what we individually can be doing to help keep the music scene alive, especially a music scene as historical as the one in Britain, is a conversation that for me is exactly the reason why I started this podcast. So, without any further ado, I will pass you on to the conversation I had with Ricky Bates.
I went to fucking Comedy Store in LA, and you go there on the night and it's like a blind booking, and there's 16 comedians and you don't know who you're going to get. And I went there and it was David Spade, Joe Rogan.
That's so cool.
The Roast Master guy, Jeff Thing. And the Roast Master guy was roasting Bruce Willis the next day. They were recording it. So he did the whole thing to like play it out in front of the crowd to see how they reacted to certain jokes and if they were too dark or like too fucked up and stuff.
Because he gets pretty dark with some of his stuff.
Yeah, so they have like a no phone policy in there, so you have to keep your phone in your pocket, and then you have to buy 2 drinks minimum when you're there, and obviously pay to get in. But you literally, it's only 200 seats, it's tiny. They're so gifted to have that shit. Dave Chappelle just turns up there at 1 a.m. all the time and does like 2 hours.
You don't really get stuff like that, because you've got like the comedy club in London and like the jazz.
That stuff never happens.
Not
it's
like
all
that.
Preemptive.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you get like weird warm-ups sometimes where you don't get it when people just show up. Like the one night that was out there recently was just ridiculous, and where it was like, oh, Dave Chappelle, John Mayer,
No.
Yeah, and then Aziz Ansari, Chris Rock, and Kevin Hart. That's like all on the same thing. And obviously people tried to get their phones out and stuff and were getting chucked out. And I'm like, look, you can't do this.
I've been at a few shows where they do the whole no phone thing.
Yeah, because if you go to a Dave Chappelle show anyway, you get your phone locked up in a pouch.
Oh, really?
If you go to, I went to one of his legit shows in Washington, where he's from. I didn't realise he's from Washington, but he did 7 nights sold out in Washington.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Imagine being at the stage where you can sell 7 nights out in the same place.
Yeah,
just like comfortably.
That's like the main theatre there. It's where Johnny Cash like started and all that. But Ed Sheeran was literally sat behind me. I was with my ex at the time. And I elbowed her and I was like, Ed Sheeran sat behind us. And she's like, no, he's not. I was like, definitely is, because he was doing shows in Washington, like in the arena there. And she's like, nah, because I was like, well, we'll go to the late one because he's better when he's more stoned. And they won't like put a time limit on it, which they didn't. So he did like 2.5 hours, and half of it was like unrehearsed.
That's so cool.
Him just picking on people in the crowd. And
yeah, I find that with Joe Rogan, like the interview with Elon Musk was so funny. And I was like, you just need to do that every time. I don't want to hear Elon Musk talk anymore unless he's high. No.
I got like fairly far through that podcast, and then the way Elon Musk talks is so preemptive.
Yeah.
That you can tell that he plays everything back in his head before he talks, and that's why he stutters a lot. But then he has a really weird way of conceptualizing everything. I'm just like, oh, okay.
He does, yeah.
And obviously this new like brain chip thing that he's got, that he's gonna, have you heard about that? So that he's gonna put chips in people's brains basically to advance them as, it's basically cyborg shit. It's fucking crazy. Like,
That's cool.
Yeah.
Did you watch the one with Tom DeLonge?
Oh god,
It was the cringiest thing, especially because he did Travis Barker
yeah,
really
because
close
he
after.
calls him out. Joe's like, that's just, how do you know that's not horse shit? Like all the time, and that's what's rad about him. He's like, as soon as he questions something that he knows about, like obviously he knows loads about Bob Lazar. I mean, like he just had him on.
Yeah.
Like he knows loads about like UFOs and like all the people that he's had on, and that he's focused on it for like 20 years. And Tom DeLonge comes on and says, "Oh, there's this and this," and then he's like, "Nah, that's actually horseshit." And then Tom DeLonge's like, "No, because I'm working with someone that's really high up in the Royal Air Force of the government." I was like, "Why have you been given that like sort of clearance? Why? Because you're a guy that was in a pop punk band?"
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
But the funny thing is that then Travis was like, "Well, yeah, but." He believes it.
Of course
he just
does,
really believes it, and then that's just a more like. Then you start going into a slopey conversation. It was like, should someone be looking after this?
The thing is with Travis Barker, a lot of people that don't like him because of the way he works in the music industry. Like it's very, like his setup. So basically, I went on a couple of days of that Blink tour, and it's so insane to see like how it actually works in terms of logistics. And Travis Barker's kept separate from everybody, like because he's worth 85 mil, and Mark Hoppus is worth like 20 mil, whatever, and then Matt Skiba's worth like 5p.
Mark hasn't jumped out of a plane though.
No,
fallen out of a plane.
Yeah. Well, it's been covered in fucking aviation fuel and burning to death.
Okay.
I mean, that was horrifying. Listening to that,
Yeah.
have you heard that?
No.
Obviously, when the plane crashed and he survived, like Travis Barker, and then that's why Travis Barker now every tour he comes to Southampton. So he gets the QE2, which takes 11 days, and he hires out the whole top floor of the QE2 for him and his family, like the cruise ship. And then the cruise ship gets to Southampton, he stays at the Grand Devere, and then he goes to the first day of the tour. But he won't fly anywhere because obviously he literally
So
goes back to
ridiculous.
death. Like his entire, like when he talks about it on podcasts, I've never heard it, and he's never came out about it in that depth, saying like how he was in hospital and didn't know where he was or who he was for like months on end.
But what had happened to
skin
the people
graft
as
his
well?
entire body.
Like,
Yeah, didn't know. Yeah, he could get
intense.
told that his best friends were like dead because he was in and out of consciousness constantly. Like it's a really dark story. It's really fucked up.
Yeah, it's hard. But yeah, so you say you're tired, Ricky. You've just come back from a break.
Are we recording it?
Yeah, we're recording now. I'm using something that I can use to at least flow into
Segue.
a conversation. Yeah.
Okay. I'm tired. Yes, I suppose I'm like I'm always mentally tired. There's a physical tiredness, but for my age, I do quite well.
Yeah, I struggle with that because I turned 30 and I never thought when I was younger that it would impact energy levels.
Oh yeah.
At all. Like even at 24, I'm like, yeah, nothing's changing. Nothing's. And then 29 hit, and I think I started going, fuck, it's changing.
28, onwards, the hangovers are 2 days.
Yeah.
And then you just have to either cope with it or just learn to cope with it. I've learned to cope with it working in this industry.
Yeah.
But you can't, the problem is, if you have a band through that you're friends with that you haven't seen for a year and they're like, let's have a beer, you can't be like, nah, fuck off, mate. Like, I'm not drinking because I'm on a health spree or blah or whatever, because you just feel rude.
Yeah.
And you never know if you're going to see that person again. Also, with the way bands are, like the last time I did Teenage Bottle Rocket and then like the drummer died, like, and then you're like, you're never going to see that person again. So it's just stuff like that. It's not that that's always going to happen, but there's always this element of you do it to be hospitable, and also aside from being their promoter, you're also their friend and the host. So you don't want to be like, they're like, oh, let's go out for a beer afterwards. Like, no, I'm chucking it in early tonight, guys. I'm going to go home and read 50 Shades of Grey or whatever.
I've done it.
Not that
I've
read
put
that.
bands on and then be like, oh, can we hang out now? And me be like, I'm going to bed. And you do feel like if you do that once, that's pretty much the end of your relationship, unless the band's really understanding of your situation.
But a lot of times the bands are 50-50 because they don't want to party, there'll be two that want to go to sleep and the rest will want to
Yeah.
stay up. So then you figure out who wants to do what, and as long as they're comfortable, it's cool. But there's a lot of times where, especially in the punk scene, there used to be, when like pop first come through and stuff, and we didn't know where to put them, and we had to put them in like punk houses if it wasn't at mine, and it'd be like Punisher kids, and they're like, we don't want to be around this. So they're like, you know, you have to find, they'd rather just sleep on top of each other or in the van or whatever, instead of being questioned about that.
That's ridiculous.
What the next album is, or what's your favourite show, how about this song, tell me about this band. They don't want to be in that environment. Yeah. They just want to hang out with people and chill and just shoot the shit, not like being in a Q&A, because that's what happens in those environments. As you know, people get very like overzealous of it, and they're like, oh my god, it's this band, and then all of a sudden the 28-year-olds become 18 again. So yeah, I always have to be aware of those sorts of people if they're around, especially if you bring them into like the backstage here. I'm like, why are you here? Get out.
Yeah.
Will Gold, get out. Stop punishing. Nobody wants to listen to the songs.
How were you good with that when you first started promoting? At gauging like when you meet people you really looked up to, was it natural to you to be pretty professional with your job role?
No, it was literally all just. It's very much like this whole entire thing is that I'm still learning how, from every aspect of like a social aspect to the tech aspect to me trying to do bigger shows, and every element. If I'm not learning, then I feel I would just stop. I would just quit, because if it becomes completely stale and it's not fun. It's fun for me to make mistakes or fuck up, or it's very rare that I get nervous about like anything unless we're doing like a Guildhall show, and when you go to these larger capacities, there's more things that are out of your control because there's so many moving parts that shit can blow up, and you'll be like, you know, in terms of like bands gauging them. It's when I first started, I probably was that Punisher kid because I lived in a house. It was like me, Will, and Ben, and the bands would stay in our crappy student house, like on the sofa, on the floors or whatever, and you would stay up drinking till whatever o'clock, and then you wouldn't. The thing is, you don't know about it until somebody kind of says, "Oh, these guys are knackered. Maybe they want to go to bed or whatever." But because again, they're adults as well, and sometimes they're like 5 years older than you, and they've been on X amount of. They want to go to bed, but they'll be like, "I'll stay awake," because for them it's rude because we're putting them up. And until you see it from that perspective, that there has to be like a middle ground with it, because they'll be knackered for the next tour, because they got to get, most of the time they got to get up at stupid o'clock to get in a van to drive X amount of hours to go somewhere else and do it all again. And a lot of them are hitting it hard every single night, so they're like hungover and tired and lethargic. And so the personal space thing is weird, and it's the same as being starstruck by people. Like, I'm way beyond that now. Like, I've stood and had conversations with Mike Patton and not known it's Mike Patton until ridiculous. Security came and dragged him off. And I'm like, oh, alright, cool.
There must be someone that if you met, you'd still be starstruck though. Like someone.
Justin Timberlake, I think.
Yeah.
Justin Timberlake and Jake Gyllenhaal in the same room.
Yeah,
I think I'd explode. Oh, and Joaquin Phoenix.
Okay.
If Joaquin Phoenix was in the mix, if all three of these blokes walked up the stairs now,
you just shit yourself.
Oh, Ronda Rousey, just for good measure. I was like, oh, alright, sick. That was the last person that I made a fan, boy, girl, non-gender specific attempt to meet, was Ronda Rousey when I was in Vegas, but I'd been drinking for like 14 hours, so I backed out of it. I just knew that she was like
a good idea.
Yes, and also her boyfriend's her husband, Travis Brown, is an ex-heavyweight UFC, and he's huge.
Definitely not a good idea.
No. I mean, especially if there's a drunk guy, but she's a really big punk fan, so she's a really big Pennywise fan. She loves like all this SoCal, like, I just wanted to like cheer her off about that. But, yeah, she's become obviously this huge deal.
Yeah.
Like in the wrestling world as well. From going from the UFC queen to the WWE queen in a year to headlining like WrestleMania. That's wild. So for me, again, that's more wanting to meet those people because of what they've achieved, and kind of looking up to them on the level of being like they've been beaten the crap out of like she did in her last 2 fights, and she still came back from it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and she still has the balls to call out like DNBs, which she calls do nothing bitches.
Yeah.
You know, like it's which I love to bits. I don't follow it now really at all, unless Will and Dan made me watch AEW thing the other day because it was in my living room. I was like, "Oh, we're watching this then, are we? 3 hours of this." And then I was like, "I'm just gonna go do the washing up." Like, and then the last 10 years I've been MMA. I've watched UFC since I was 18, so 16 years. And at that point, UFC was illegal in the UK. And the only way I found out about it is my older brother was a judo practitioner, and he would order the UFC boxes from Germany, and they would come in these like huge porn VHS size boxes. It used to be like 4 times the size of the video. And so it's like I never understood the meaning of that either. Do you know the ones I mean?
Yeah, I do.
I just like these oversized boxes.
You used to get it for video games as well. You used to get video games in these huge boxes.
Yeah,
like
and Amiga
boxes.
and Commodore, and it was just a floppy disk.
Yeah, a floppy disk, and you're like, well, sometimes it would be 8 floppy disks, depending on the game you're playing, with an elastic band around it.
That's the way Amazon get their idea for the packaging now. Oh, what's the biggest box we can put this smallest item in? So it's interesting. With UFC, I get it. I really was drawn to that because of the independence of the fighters, and so people don't realise like it's not like a Premier League thing where there's teams, but the teams are the fight gyms, and then the fight gyms represent, you know, each fighter, and trainers represent each fighter, and the events tend to be based around the way they work is the headline. Whoever the headline is, or the champion, if it's Khabib or Conor or whoever, or John Jones, or that camp will take priority of like having to have all their other fighters like underneath on the undercard.
That's really cool.
Which is very clever.
Yeah.
It's a very good structural way to do it because it helps them grow like their smaller fighters and things. But it's just once you get put in, like, if you've ever been to MMA fights, when I first started going to them, I was horrified. And then you kind of desensitise to it because your natural figure is to like break fights up, really.
In Asia, we watched some fights on TV. I didn't convince her to go watch one live.
No.
And we watched some fights on TV, and she was like, "It's so brutal."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, but check out how they're doing this, and like, look at how they're moving, like, and look at how." And suddenly, after like an hour of it, you start seeing a completely different side that you didn't.
Yeah, you got to understand like these people, they're disciplines. It's like even the guys that are in UFC now, like Henry Cejudo is like a double champ, but he's an Olympic gold medalist. He's a NCAA like winning wrestler, so he has the highest accolades in.
That's so cool.
You know, as an athlete, and he's a double MMA champion. So it's like, you know, where did these people go? That's what happened to Ronda Rousey. She was a silver medalist in judo in the Olympics, and they don't make any money. So once they've got that after their Olympics, that's it. Like, nobody pays them. Like, there's nowhere for them to compete.
Another independent league that's starting out like that, which is super awesome. I'm trying to get someone on the podcast for it, but it's pretty difficult. And it's called the Big Three. It's a basketball league, but it's done by Ice Cube. He's the guy that started it, which is super cool. And I guess again, it has so much relation to music venues. It's got so much in
the grassroots side of it, like the whole story of the UFC and them buying it for, you know, $3 million. When they were going to close it down because they were like, no, they were calling it a blood sport. The governors didn't want it. The government didn't want it. They couldn't get a TV deal because it was too brutal, you know. And 20 years later, they sell it for $4 billion. To $4 billion on that. It's just like ridiculous. It's like it's
cool,
the biggest sports deal of all time. Like when people were saying, "Oh, it's not a legit sport," blah blah blah, and obviously they've grown it. The Fertitta brothers who own MGM, a load of the Vegas casinos and loads of the Strip, like MGM Grand, Mandalay Bay, Palms. The Palms is like a main kind of UFC stayover for fighters and stuff. But yeah, the business side of it is super interesting to see how they took it from the brink of extinction to grow it to that. And obviously now the other guys backed out of it, but Dana White got a 10% straight away for $400 million.
That's amazing.
So like he never has to he started as a boxing promoter before UFC, but it's interesting. Same as Vince McMahon. The same thing is why I got interested in promoting and reading about how he learned how to promote from his dad. and sell events. It's the same thing. You're selling an event to people, and you have to find a way to do it. Obviously, I don't have fireworks and a ramp and a screen.
You could have.
Like,
I'll help out with that.
Doing flips and shit. Like, I don't have that in my dispense, but it translates a lot of it. The similarities are like very heavy.
And promoting the underdog as well. It's not like the types of bands that Joiners has, for example. And the way that some wrestling is viewed is quite similar. You're having to push something that isn't mainstream. It's not something that everyone's just going to tell their mate about, and all the mates are going to go, oh yeah, let's go because it's Justin Timberlake.
No, yeah.
So I would definitely go to that show. But yeah, it takes some convincing, and it actually takes some like thought how to do that.
In this day and age, it's the hardest thing. Like I have an assistant now, Toby. He's like 21, but because we're involved in it day to day, you have to remove yourself from that mindset and say, well, if we're trying to sell tickets to people that have done 60 hours of Boots this week, or 40 hours at Lush or whatever, I'm just assuming their work contract hours here, but
zero workout.
It's you have to consider their mindset of they really would only probably go out on a Friday and Saturday.
Yeah.
So to get them out the other 5 days of the week when we're open, you have to sell the band in a way that might seem obvious. But then the problem is you also can't sell yourself out because your audience doesn't want to see you promoting this in this way. So it's always we can lean on it in terms of, if you're a fan of this band or bigger band, but we never go like, if you're a fan of Foo Fighters or U2, because that's too broad of a spectrum. So at this level, you have to kind of deal with people that are educated in music anyway. We're not, problem is with Southampton that it's a very unengaged city is the way I would describe it, that people don't engage in the culture that they have offered, and then they complain about things when they get cancelled because they're like, we'll just go next year. Like we did Common People 4 years in a row, and then it didn't perform as well on one day last year, and then they sold the whole company to like Live Nation. Live Nation didn't want to take that, so then they didn't bring it back. So now we don't have any like major festival in Southampton, but all people on social media do is bitch about the lineup when it was there, and they're like, we aren't going to that, we'll just go next time. When it's like, so for example, Duran, one of the headliners, it's 60 quid to go and see them in an arena. It's £25 to walk around the bloody corner to see them, plus like all the other stuff that were on it before. You got like 7 other main stage acts, a whole dance tent, and then a whole Joiners band tent with like Dream Wife and Black Honey and Honey Blood and like the Magic Gang and stuff like that. You've got all of this other stuff going on for 25 quid.
Yeah, it's a huge festival.
And you get to go in, there's like food and there's loads of stuff set up, there's like fireworks. It's like a different environment. You're immersed in a different environment. But people in Southampton are just like, unless you give us exactly what we want, we're not going to pay for it. Like on a mainstream level, and that's what you're up against when it comes to this, because people will get into bands when they get to the Guildhall size. So Guildhall size. So when they're on a national playing field, it's a Guildhall size. If a band's playing Guildhall like Royal Blood are, so it's like 1,700 tickets. In London, they're doing somewhere in the mix of 8,000 to 10,000, like Ali Pali. So why are people waiting until these bands get this big and until they're engaging in it?
Yeah.
Which is the change in the shift in culture in the last like 6 years. It's just wild watching it.
Would you say that's mainly in rock culture?
In guitar based, guitar based culture.
Because I was
clubs
watching,
are still to a degree they're smashing it. They still lose a lot of money, obviously.
I was
in London,
thinking more like grime and hip hop. Like I was watching
grime,
Mike Skinner. He's just done a documentary of Noisy, and he's like talking about the Birmingham like grime scene. And talking to people on the street, and they know the names of like independent local. That you don't get that. You don't ask someone on the street, and they know. Like maybe Southampton, like Creeper changed that in Southampton a bit, maybe with the level they hit. But you don't get that with bands that are at the top of their level in terms of musically what they're doing. You don't get people know who Nervous are, for example. No.
I think with grime though, it's a kudos thing that if you know the people who are at the bottom, that then you were there first. And they want to know, and they're engaged. Definitely. The grime shows we've done here, and the garage shows we've done here, it's like great, and it's there's a lot of trouble all the time. There's more trouble than we have at any other like sort of shows, because the kids have this idea that they're related to gang culture somehow, and they're 16 or 15 and live in their parents' house. But as soon as they're out in this sort of environment, it's like puff chest, bum bags, TN hats, like let's all act like a little dick and spark up a spliff in the middle of the venue and then complain when you get chucked out for it.
Which
it's
is
like
ridiculous, because so many of them are the smartest people in terms of they've suffered the most, they understand what the issues are for our country. And they're smart enough to understand lyrics that often would go over most people's heads. But they decide to not.
They act. It's the chip on the shoulder thing, and that's not to go with, like, there's obviously loads of intelligent kids that are involved in that scene.
For
it's
sure.
just there's always it's always the 3 or 4 kids out of the 10 that will just be like Larry or do whatever, and you're just like, okay.
I think it's evolving, man. I think like the latest like wave of hip hop artists in the UK, the things they're talking about are gonna spark something. Like, who was it? I think it was Slow Tie on an interview recently. He was like, you didn't talk politics with your mates. Like, I didn't talk about it because they'd be like, what, are you a pig? Like, please? Like, shut up. Like, and I think that's what's changing. If kids start talking and feeling like they can actually open up about important subjects and not just act tough. Which is what hip-hop was for a long time.
Well, it's cool to be educated. That's what they're selling. Like, that's not what they're selling. That's what they're saying. Look, you got to give a shit. And people like Slow Tire telling the Queen to go fuck herself. And, Stormzy's coming out at Glastonbury and calling out Boris Johnson and Theresa May and stuff like that. Even when the thing that he did at the Brits, which I didn't watch the Brits.
I didn't watch.
But so basically, they do the rehearsals. So when they go live, that there's no like swearing or whatever, or there's nothing that's going to offend anyone. So basically, during his rehearsal, he just did the song like normally or whatever.
He did a rating
and then when he and then when he did it live, he changed all the lyrics, and they couldn't do anything because it was live. And he was obviously like, fuck Theresa May, you screwed all these people at Grenfell, and like properly went in on her. And the producers are like, what the fuck, pull this now. They're like, we can't, it's live, obviously. So he knows that they can't do it, and that's what's sick about it. It's like they're the new punk. They're the anti-establishment,
and that's why I mentioned it. Do you think that's what's? I mean, I know there's a lot to it. I know there's obviously the economy and what it's done to venues, ticket prices. There's also the fact that social media came in and distracted people a lot. But is it the fact that it's missing a bit of punk attitude?
Not me whistleblowing, but labels don't want to put stuff out. Because the way radio works now, so you talk about the mediums of which people listen to music. So it used to be that DJs would choose their own music, and that would be the playlist. Like now, labels Warner and Universal, Sony can go to Radio 1 and be like, well, we'll buy these spots. So then the radio makes more money. So then basically everything's preemptive. So they get to decide what goes on these playlists. Like Six Music's totally different, like Steve Lamacq stuff. Right, but the mainstream things that people listen to is all bought and paid for. Whereas before there was actually choice, like for these DJs to do it. Like Zane Lowe obviously left and went to Beats, and like Hugh Stevens was probably one of the last ones that like would choose his stuff. Annie Mac probably does to a degree, I imagine, but it's still like again really out of their control because the system is different. So because people aren't buying records, the whole music industry just changes over the course of the last 10 years. And then that trickles down to like radio won't play stuff that's going to offend people, right? They can't, like for example, all these bands like Bring Me Horizon used to be quite heavy, and they're like, oh, in order for us to get on the radio, we're just going to EQ and compress everything as much as possible. We heard the latest
song on the radio.
Like so, it doesn't even sound like it doesn't even sound like
no, it doesn't.
So they're just making it for an audience so that it's nice in their ears. That's not good. Like you're not like helping anybody. There needs to be like truth of people want like look at pop music in the 80s, like that's all band kind of based music, but it had messages and things to say, but it's all controlled from the top. Like obviously BBC constantly gets accused of being partially right wing or like the way they do their news, and so then you just don't know who the people are at the top, and they don't want that. They'll have filters that these songs can't have political messages in for this, and it's like it has to be a straight down walking line as possible. because they don't want everybody, again, because of the outrage culture. And it's like, if you say anything that someone would deem to be racist on daytime radio or anti-Semitic or homophobic, and people can obviously, everybody misconstrues everything all the time because everybody's me all the time now. So and then everybody starts going it on Twitter and it gets retweeted and nobody wants that bad PR. So it's just this fear of like, oh, we can't put anything that's slightly edgy. I mean, look at...
Oh, that's a huge problem.
Yeah,
it is. And I'm all for calling shit out that's horrible. And I said it the other day to someone, I was like, look, if something's putting someone in danger and we're doing it to protect people, I completely understand it. But as soon as it crosses that line and it's no longer to protect anyone else, then it's just about you. And like the things that happen, and the problem with it is, in my opinion, isn't the actual outrage. I understand the outrage. You should be allowed to be pissed off if someone's done something you consider shitty. But it's how easy it is for that to turn into bullying.
Oh,
it's
yes.
so easy to tag someone in and have all your followers then.
You're witch hunting people and taking things out of context because you don't have this conversational tone or delivery, and you don't understand how people were saying things. So it's easy to take something and twist it and misconstrue it and do whatever. But on the other hand, you have people like Piers Morgan that use that for bait to like push their own careers. Like this guy's just winding people up constantly, and all these dicks are just sat on social media like eating it up, and like you're promoting this guy by calling him, doing whatever. You're giving him the old saying of any press is good press, whether it's bad press. It's the same. Like you know how it works, but it's with the radio thing. It drives me insane because obviously there's like idol. This is what I don't get. Right, I love idols. Don't get me wrong. I love what they stand for. It's cool, and the songs are great, but you can't call them out because one of them is middle class and say this is what that whole Sleaford Mod Slaves Idols thing, where all three of these bands are on national promoters, right? They're not even independents anymore, and they're arguing each other about who's the most punk or whatever, and you're like, hang on a minute. It's like it's like none of you are to this degree, but Idols at least have like the best messaging and the best music and the way it's delivered, right? And they've played in punk bands in Bristol for years, so their legs way more than others. Like Sleaford Mods, I get it. I can't believe they're still like at the position where they're at, and I think they kick off a lot to get the attention. It's like, I don't know, but what fucks me off is that explain this to me, right? So there's an entire punk scene that's existed for ages, and there's all these great bands like Martha and Nervous and political punk bands that were around for ages, when there was like, you know, Apologies I Have None and Chilliton, and like all these bands that were around for ages that have very big, Human Out Bomb, all this household name stuff, that have very big similarities to Idols. But all of that stuff got ignored. But for some reason, Idols sold out Ali Pali in a day or 2 days or whatever, like, you know, which is like 10,000 tickets. It's timing as well, but...
Like, the country's pissed off. Like, I think of Apologies, and I remember listening to that and it clicking with me in a huge way. But I grew up with my dad talking about being in a dictatorship. Like, that to me was like, this is important. Everyone else was like, nothing's happened, nothing bad's happened in like years. And like, what's the issue? The UK, compared to other countries for a long time, has had it easy. And I don't mean it easy, people suffer, I know people suffer, but compared to like dictatorships happening in other countries, like wars breaking out within the country, it's a good 20 years where our parents, from being young, haven't really had anything that bad happen as a country.
No.
Other than the economy kind of did.
Yes, and also there's the whole governmental thing with, you know, fucking Trump and now Boris Johnson is, I feel like they're just putting people in a position of power that have these weird characters that are easy to sell. Like the media, if it's media bait, then these people in position of power can get their power because of media bait.
They even look funny.
Right.
It's funnier to have on.
They even like, it's this whole clown thing. But the Idols thing, like, I love that band. Don't get me wrong, I love Joy,
me too,
right? But I don't get why culture abuse aren't even half as big as them, because basically it's the same thing. This is what I don't get. There's loads of bands that are exactly like them, but for some reason everybody keeps calling Idols an indie band. And I'm just like, can we stop this? There's like DIY and like Enemy, that's the only online stuff, or whatever outlet, and they're just like indie blood. I was like, if you listen to the music, indie music is not aggressive or political like in that manner whatsoever. And there's a weird, it's like them and Bad Breeding, very good band, and Eagles, like all these bands that are heavier, Fontaine's DC, they're punk bands because again Fontaine's songs are all political like songs sort of relating to what's going on in Ireland, and you know it's the indie bands don't cover that. Indie bands sing.
I used to have this argument about certain indie bands where it'd be like, but I like them because they're a punk band. Because it's like they're covering subjects that just aren't like. I remember listening to like really early Bright Eyes stuff and being like, no indie band says that. And I know people hate Bright Eyes. I really like the new stuff he's done. The what is it with Phoebe Bridgers? I'm really into that.
No.
But I remember listening to stuff like that, and I remember listening to like Why. I'm not sure if you've listened to Why. They did a record called Alopecia, and it's like phenomenal.
I have. I've listened to the Phoebe Bridgers stuff again. It's really really cool. But then there's people like Laura Stevenson, and her music's just as good.
For sure.
But it's tiny. I was like, I don't understand why one thing takes off and the others don't. And I feel like it's because of social media and the way that people gauge bands is that they have to be told what to like, and once it gets like slightly big, then everybody latches onto it, right?
Yeah.
So they have to be told, so that it's almost like they have to be given approval, like a societal, musical approval, and then all of a sudden these bands can get big. But if not, then they can only get to like 2,000 tickets.
I think it's something that repeats itself in so many areas of our society. And I've done it. When we were in Asia, we'd go into town without knowing what we'd eat. Because of watching like a YouTube video like where the chef was like, if you see a queue, get in it. We were like, cool, well like there's a queue, I'll get in it. Doesn't mean it's the best place in town. It might just be like have an offer on that day, and
it's how people like source information as well.
Yeah,
like you can buy your position in the music industry now, and that's what's dark about it. It's like there's bands like the Hunter, who I've worked with, okay, who obviously have a lot of money behind them from family or label publishing or whatever, and they came out of nowhere and they're just like buying ads, Facebook ads, Google algorithms. So their bands are like, if you type in 1975, it's like, you will also like the Hunter.
Yeah.
And it's like, it'll pop up and you're like, oh, okay, right. So it's like, so if you can buy your way, like we did shows with them. I did 2 shows here, second one sold out, and then all of a sudden we did 800 tickets the next one, very fast, because of how they got hold of that net of that demographic of young girls, and they were like, and once they're into it, they're pushing it on this and that, so it's like free promotion once these younger girls get into it, and it's but it's just, you can pay for it to get it into their feeds, to get it on their phone, so it's like subliminal messaging. You must like this band, this band, if you're cool you would like this band, and it's like, so but who actually likes the music? And that's what the problem is now. It's like, you might like it because you're being told that it's cool and they've got a couple of like easy accessible indie bangers, but what's the rest? Well, this is the problem with music. It's not tangible anymore, that everybody's like, oh, the idea of an album format's fucking dead basically. Unless you're a music snob and it's a new 9 Inch Nails album or something like that, right? Not a music snob, that's the wrong
but I know what you
terminology.
mean. So, yeah.
Unless you're like heavily rooted in like you know, you love music, your music head would be the word, and you're like, oh, this whole record's incredible, because you have to understand these artists, some of them luckily are still developing things as a whole unit, but majority wise they're getting on a major label and being told, right, we need 3 singles for this and this day, and then the rest will just come with it. So then they're just like rushing. So really, the younger kids only want to listen to the accessibility of music. They only want to listen to those 3 or 4 songs, and then the idea of this record dies. So it's like, even with bands like Narwhals that are like probably were peaking when they were just doing EP, and then they start bringing out albums and momentum slows down, because the kids don't have the fucking patience to sit through a whole album.
No, they
so
don't.
It's like
I think that's
how they digest music is totally different to probably how you
That's
and
what I was going to say. But the build up, the hype for it is different as well. Like I talked about it with Sean McGowan. We were saying about how when HMV died, like people. I'd go and I'd be so excited to spend my 30 quid EMA on 3 CDs, and I wouldn't know what 3 new CDs that were out. I'd go in and I'd look at them, and I'd basically pick 3 that looked cool. And sometimes they'd be absolutely atrocious. I remember buying the OK Go CD because they had it on and getting home and I'd be like, it's got a good song, and that good song's got 30 seconds of good song in it. It's like,
but you can't like take it back.
You can't take it back.
Like these songs.
But it's still like, so you listened to it because that was.
But that band doesn't make it money.
Yeah.
Like this whole system is broken, which is why the whole system of these venues shutting down is broken, because the way it used to work, surprise, is that the amount that I pay for a band now compared to 10 years ago is absolutely ridiculous at the same level, because they used to get advances from their labels. So if they were even selling 50,000 records, that's 50,000 £15 CDs. If you sell 50,000 records now, it's usually 100 streams is one record, right? So, but those streams are controlled by third party, which is Spotify and Apple, who only give you 0.1p per play. Yeah. So if you sell an album through streaming, you're only going to get about £2-3 out of it tops, whereas before you're getting 15. So there's no money. There's like no money in it. It's absolutely ridiculous. So then that money doesn't go to the label. The label then don't give the money to the band for a tour advance. So it's a tour advance, it would be like, right, here's £4,000 to go on a 10-day tour of the UK. Spread that across each day. You got £400, right? But so you can do whatever, feed yourselves, like pay for petrol, blah blah blah. So then you remove that money from the equation because nobody's buying records. So then that £400 has to be made up by me, the promoter. Yeah. So then I have to pay that band £400 more than what they were going to get paid before. Otherwise, they can't tour. So then all of a sudden, a £400 fee becomes an £800 fee. But the same amount of people are only going to turn up, which in turn means I lose money. And if I lose money 20 times, my venue closes down. And like that's really the way that I see it. Of simplifying what the reason why these venues are closing down.
That makes sense.
And it's also obviously the agent control. If you don't have relationships with booking agents, you're done for. And a lot of these people that come into venues don't have any working relationship with agent. So if you were to today decide you were going to be in-house promoter for a venue in Brighton and no agents know who you are, basically you're at square one. Yeah. And you've got to go up against 15 other promoters in Brighton that want to get the same band.
Yeah, I mean,
it's so hard.
Difficult. Like, the only way I got through that is by collaborating, which is another part of thing. When I talk to street artists, they generally have no quarrels about collaborating together and creating something. And it seems that promoters get really funny about sharing contacts and helping each other, which to me seemed weird because I get the business side now, especially now that I've done it for so long. I get that side of it and I understand it. If you got into punk rock especially, you're doing it to put the band on and you're doing it because you want as many people in that room as possible. You're not doing it to make an extra £50, which is like...
And there's no money in punk anyway.
Exactly.
There's never really...
So what's the point?
No, I get it. But the thing is, there are more arguments. Like Kate, who was one of my assistants before Toby, she did all of her own above the waves stuff everywhere, and then she would constantly get into arguments with other DIY promoters or DIY bands that are doing house shows or this, that, and the other, and there'd be more arguments in that than there was with me dealing with like huge tours. Because obviously it's the passion comes into it, but then it's just like I don't understand everybody's at each other's throats when there's meant to be a sense of community. And for me, over the years, the punk scene's just torn itself to bits in terms of obviously like the whole social media's torn it to bits as well, because everybody's calling everybody out for doing anything or saying something, or it's like used to be as the whole NoFX thing. When did punk rock become so safe? And it never used to be. Like, this is the whole point. It's about, saying what you think. Otherwise, there is no point. You're not a punk band.
That's how you learn. That's how I felt about punk anyway. That there are times when you're with other punks and they say something where you're like, whoa, that's out of order.
Oh yeah. But they don't understand it
exactly.
as well.
And the fact they've said it means someone then goes, you should, like, that's wrong. They wouldn't, if they don't have these conversations and they don't say something stupid. No one's going to tell them they're saying something stupid.
No.
And if they surround themselves with other people who just say the same thing as them,
bullshit,
then it's just going to get worse and worse. And it's going to be more like say we're talking about racism. There's going to be more racists by the end of the year if we don't change their mind.
No. Yeah, but then the thing is with the punk scene, they also shit on other scenes of music heavily, and they all lean on this DIY thing. Like all these indie bands and these metal bands and these pop bands, and to a degree, that at this level are all DIY.
Yeah.
Everybody's coming in and setting up their own gear.
Yeah.
They don't have crews of people doing it for them. Everybody's like living on nothing. They only get 12 beers. They don't all roll up in a £500,000 tour bus. It's like this misconception of these other genres, and proclaiming the DIY thing. I kind of get it, but everybody's DIY at this level. Nobody's not DIY until maybe like 500 tickets beyond. Then you start talking about having management and techs and people that set up all your stuff for you and blah blah blah. But to proclaim the elitism, which I really don't like of it, is just like labeling it constantly. That's what for me has kind of torn it apart.
Yeah.
Because everybody's saying, well, I'm more DIY than you, I've done this.
And it's even down to micro labeling, like as in like then like emo and like indie punk and punk. Like when I was going to gigs when I was younger, if it sounded cool and it was loud, I thought it was awesome.
Yep. And then
like,
the idea of the mixed bill is dead as well.
Yeah, like that's what I was going to say. Scroobius Pit playing with punk bands, and I was like, this is amazing, like incredible.
We used to do like something that would be like pop punk mix of hardcore. So you'd have like Attack Vipers and you and the Atom Bomb, and then you had like Don Ramos players and stuff like that, and then you'd mix it. So you have like a gruff band, a fucking pop punk band, a hardcore band, and now people don't want that. They want the same thing. They want it build again. It goes back to this whole people being self-entitled, because the social media lives, like there is a constant stream of their echo chamber. So then they apply that to their everyday life. Like for example, when, not that I give a shit about Festival Republic or Live Nation getting butthurt about things, but when they announce Reading Festival or Leeds Festival, every year they just get attacked about the lineup, and it's like all these kids' responses are, if I was doing this, I'd book this, and this, like, and then you'll be like, so basically you're complaining because it's not your exact dream lineup that you want. Is what they're complaining about, right?
Yeah.
And when I was like a 16-year-old, 15-year-old saving up to buy a Reading ticket, I'll be like stoked. There's like 10 bands that I want to watch, but if there's not fucking 40 of the exact bands that people want, or like hip hop, the kids will kick off. Oh, I can't believe you haven't booked this festival. Shit, this is absolute shit. Won't be going to that. And like as if the promoter's going to be like, oh fucking hell, let's cancel it then.
I think people are always saying stuff like that, but it wasn't heard before. So no. you like after Reading or Leeds, before social media, you'd have got a lot of people leaving, being like, I only got to watch 10 bands, that was shit.
Yeah.
Or when they saw the poster, they'd be saying it. No one knew that other than their 5 mates. No. Now everyone can like it.
The idea
you get all the like 10,000 people. Yeah.
This is what it is with music as well, which trickles into venues. Is the idea of self-discovery of music is completely dead because of the accessibility of it. Yeah. So if you wander into a festival tent and discover your new favourite band, which is like one of the things that was always like a Bestival thing, where it was like, oh, if you just walk into a tent and discover your new favourite DJ or band, but now it's like they'll get it up on Spotify, press play, listen to 30 seconds of it, go, nah, shit, I'm not going to that. And that's that's what it is. That's the prognosis of how they like do it. I'm like, that's weird. Unless the band's been given a cool points thing where they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's like, everyone's saying that's really good, and it's like, because there's bands that sell tickets now that I fucking hate. But
there's always bands that sell tickets that you hate. It's always.
But you do it because it's good for business.
Yeah.
Right, and the problem is with being a promoter that you have to let that self-indulgence go, because if you only booked everything that you like, then it's just going to be you and 4 other people.
Especially if you're doing full time, like.
Oh yeah.
And then there's the whole thing of like when I've put bands on and then they tell you who they want to bring in support, and you're like, oh, I did not want that band to be supportive. I could put this bill together, like it happens, but at the same time, that's part of what I mean about collaborating with other people. Like when I was younger, I didn't expect punk gigs to be 5 bands that I loved. There was going to be shitty bands, and that was fine. That was punk. Like there being shitty bands playing loudly and learning to play. Yeah. And I've gone to gigs where you get like 17-year-old kids opening, and the crowd are just there, like openly being like, "This fucking sucks."
Oh, shit, they're just on their phones.
And you're like, this is like the next generation of bands who now might leave this gig going, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not going to promote gigs.
This is what I'm saying. No, it has to be. They have to. Young kids have to be given the green light of it's okay to like this band. They're cool. So they have to be hit up on like Pitchfork or NPR. Like they have to be put out on these mediums so that they're being given this seal of approval for people to like them. Whereas before it was like I'd go and buy Out Come the Wolves in a record store, £15. And then go back the next Saturday, travel for 50 minutes to get to a record store, read the liner notes, listen to that for a week, read the liner notes of who they thanked, then go back and buy a H2O record. And then, do you know what I mean? And it was just like discovery of music. So then you ended up like loving it. You're not always going to love it. I discovered like Union 13, which was like crazy hardcore on Epitaph. And I was like, no, I can't deal with that. So then it's like, it was years, like my favourite band, one of my favourite bands ever, Jawbreaker, I hated that band for 4 or 5 years because I didn't understand why he sung that way. Because at this point I was listening to like Simple Plan and like very like clear
Me
fucking
too, bro.
like, you know, and Take Off Your Pants and Jacket's your favourite record. And it's like
amazing.
You know,
I still like that record though, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, still a sick record, don't get me wrong, but then it's like this idea of getting into this heavier stuff. But then it was weird because you'd have like Limp Bizkit, Slipknot, and you could listen to that. But at the same time, that was kind of accessible because they were so big and there was a reason they were so big that you were like, oh, well, I have to like force myself to like it.
But there was a really distinct change from like Simple Plan era pop punk to hardcore and vice versa, like screamo through back to pop punk. Like I remember when New Me at 6 were like a screamo band, and then that started going out of style. So like
screamo,
and then it was like, but then that goes back into what you were saying. That didn't seem weird at the time. You had like Attack, a hardcore band from like playing with You Me at 6 when they were a pop up band, and it was fine, and no one complained, and everyone had a blast. And now it's like those are two separate worlds, and they're.
But those lineups now, like that's how obviously with the shows that we do here, we don't get to decide everybody that's on the bill. It used to be we book a band and then we can just stick the supports on it. Now we have to go jump through red tape to get the local bands on that we want to give a exposure to that audience. And a lot of the times the agents or the PR or the management, whoever's fucking decision it is, they take so long. We send it months in advance and I'm like, can we get a decision? We want this band to promote it and be on the poster and etc. And they'll be like, oh, okay, we'll chase it. And sometimes it comes down to 4 days before the gig and they're like, oh yeah, just stick this band on it. Because what it is they have this structure of system that they want the headline to be able to sell their own tickets, like hard tickets as they call it. And if they can't, then they'll reach out to local bands and be like, oh, can you help us fill the room? But that's a backwards mentality. To me as a promoter, I'm like, well, why don't we just stack the bill as much as we can and we'll stagger the announcements to keep people interested and then we'll sell it out. But instead it's like, oh, we'll take this in a tour support and we don't want anybody touching our gear. So once we set it up, we can't move it at all. It will be impossible to like retune, retune for 2 seconds because my fucking G strings come out of like place or whatever. It's insane. Like the even at this level, I'm just like, why is this happening? And
it's a result of capitalism.
Yeah.
It's what we've been taught. There's the business side of things and the culture side of things, and that goes for like countries as a whole or things like DIY scenes. You either do the business side or you look after the culture. And if you're going to do both, it has to be bang in the middle, because otherwise you're always going to lose one. You start getting too businessy about how you're doing music and trying to get the most money possible, especially after the record sales go down and you're relying on Spotify, and people then start squeezing the hell out of it, and you see like it ends up self-imploding,
and people end up in sheer amounts of debt. There's this idea now of how the music industry will market a band. So they'll be like, right, we're not going to take this band because they've been out this long, but what we'll do is we'll rebrand them, give them a new name, give them a hot whack producer, and then we'll put this whole like PR campaign together and we'll resell it. So then hopefully Rock Sound and Kerrang and blah will pick up on it, and then we can grow the band again, but it's essentially the same fucking thing. And you're like, oh, okay, so you're just going to waste like all these other songs and you have to scrap it and be a new thing. But the idea of that is just obtuse because they're selling this facade to kids that these bands are bigger than they are, and that's what they fall in love with. And I get it, because I was a kid and I was just like, oh, these but they were making money back when I was 16, 17. They were, because they were selling records and they were selling platinum records, and they're not now. So like these bands roll up in tour buses and they're already $100,000 in debt to their fucking record label because they've chosen the perception over the hard work. So the perception will work for a little while. Wow, this band must be like massive. They must be rock stars because they have a tour bus. Like that's how the fans will see it, and then the fan base will grow to a degree. But then you're like, that band's actually just hemorrhaging money because they're probably only getting paid.
It's the hip hop thing. They're having all the nice rings.
They're only getting paid whatever would cover half of what they're travelling in.
Yeah.
Which is just bad business sense. But the problem is these labels go, the 5-year plan for this band is to do this, this, and this. But most of these bands don't get past a fucking 2-year plan.
Well, that's the thing.
And then they get dropped and they don't hit their quotas for selling their records, and then they break up, and it sucks.
And it's not the record label doesn't lose anything because they've got enough money not to care. But what's been affected is music as a whole. It's how music's listened to in the future, and how kids will start bands, and kids coming to gigs because of how music's being treated is what will be affected by those choices at the end of the day. This
is like the problem with there not being any punk bands in Southampton is the same thing that's probably widespread, is that there's no bigger punk band that the kids look up to, for them to want to be in a band. So obviously everybody's like, oh, Bring Me is still doing this, everybody's trying to be metalcore, but then we have like 17 terrible metalcore bands in Southampton, and I'm just like, we need to stop, this needs to stop. Like, well, they want to be Parkway. Yeah. Like, you know, don't give Parkway Drive and Architects are the best people as genuine people, because I've been around them in enough environments that they're not like an image-based band at all. And also Parkway are all straight-edge Australian surfer dudes. And my friend's a tour manager, which makes it even better. Cool. He's the best tour manager in the world.
So I'm guessing you've had this conversation over and over with like the industry you work in. You talk about the problems within the music scene a lot. Have you ever heard someone give a really smart solution to what's going on? No. Is it? No. Do you think we're in? Because obviously it's all tied into like politics. It's all tied into like the government. Is it a case of similar to government where it's pretty fucked and it needs tearing down and starting anew, basically?
I don't think it needs tearing down and starting anew. I just think that there needs to be legislation within it. Obviously the monopoly of festivals is uncontrollable now. That's done and dusted, because all you have to do is start a sister company and call it something else, but it's still owned by Live Nation or AEG or whoever, but they'll just mask it that they don't. So they just, it's like, you know, they're like, oh, well, this company owned that company, but we own this company and they own that company. Like, but right at the top of the pyramid is still the same fucking big company that owns all of it. So they still own it. They're the ones funding it. They're the ones monopolising the entire thing. But I think that it's amazing that all the music venue trust stuff that Mark and Bev do is insane. And that's like so selfless for them to do it. And what they've done, the past 5+ years is incredible, because a lot of these people that run these venues are fucking idiots. I'm going to be like very like straightforward with you, not beat around the bush. They don't know what they're doing, like, and this isn't any venue that's like doing relatively well. It's in like weird places. I don't know, like weird places, not on the main touring circuit. And then they'll do whatever, and they get it wrong. And I look at it and go, who the fuck taught you how to do a show or like do whatever? You don't know what you're doing. But obviously they've released this guide to how to run a music venue, which is awesome and cool. But I mean, for me, I don't need to read a book how to do it. It's the same with that other guy who released a book about how to make it as a band in the music industry. And I was like, okay, right. So I look at this stuff and I'm just like, okay, there's the way you do it with your business model relies on how you do it as an individual. Like, you can't teach somebody to be a promoter, and you can't teach somebody to run a venue. Especially if it's all your opinion. That's what I hate. Like, just because it's worked for you doesn't mean jack shit. It's each individual city and town. Like, Winchester can kill it with folk music, and then we're 20 minutes down the road and nobody likes it really. Yeah. To a degree, unless it's like, you know. But then at the same time, round there they had
the Open Road Festival or something like that, which is or over the something like that, and which is like a folk music festival, like pretty big, and I remember that being pretty big at the time. So it kind of makes sense that it would impact the local community.
Yeah, you have that scene, but I think the ultimate way to change how music venues are working is to just challenge national promoters. Like, change your business model to go like, well, if I'm going to take a band and put them on in the Alex or a pub or King Alf and only 30 people show up, and the next time they get bigger and there's 100 and I do Heartbreakers, and the next time I do 200 there's Joiners, next time I do 300 there would be Talking Heads down the Loft, etc. 500 A65, 800 Engine Rooms. You have to keep that relationship with that band, but the problem is, as a promoter, you have to learn to put your foot down, or as like an establishment, or as the Joiners, and be like, no, we believed in this band in the first place. Once they start selling tickets and they're worth money, quote unquote, they don't get to go to a national promoter who's not put the legwork in.
For sure.
And that money then goes back into the business that believed in that act in the first place through passion or love of loving that band. Because we ain't making no money, and they ain't making no money at that point. But together, if that band grows, 1 in 10 of those bands make it, and they grow, they get looked after, they're friends with the promoter or the venue, and they have a relationship. Instead of this faceless, like, national promoters come in and they take all the business, none of that money trickles back into the venues which originally lost the money to put them where they are. It's like me building a house, and then on moving day, some fucker just pushes me under a bus and then moves into my house. But I've put in all the effort to build this house, and this toss has just run me over.
Yeah.
Like, that's essentially what it is. Like, that's how it feels when that happens to you.
For sure.
Like, when if I'm doing a band and I do 800 tickets at Engine Rooms and I'm like, oh, I want to do their Guildhall show next, I know I won't get it because the agent will immediately go to a national promoter because it makes their lives easier to go to one company to do all their shows. And I get that. Cuts out legwork, whatever, cool. But at least involve the original promoter as a co-promoter or something.
It's not future thinking. It's not thinking about the music scene 30 years from now, 60 years from now. And it's not wanting to leave a legacy, which is something really weird, and I think social media has changed. Like, bands used to think about the end goal, how they wanted to be seen when they were dead. Now everyone cares about the short-term goal, how many likes they can get on today's post,
how quickly they can get big.
It doesn't matter if in a week they're not famous anymore. They're like, how quickly can I cash in? And it doesn't even have to be money. I'm talking about just fame, like publicity. And I think that's really changing how we're seeing bands and how we're reacting to what they put out, like all that stuff.
I think with that though, is like there has to be a book, not a physical book, for like that. Here's how you do it. No, it's not like a bullet point guide system, but a rough guide to how to act and how to graft as a band. I think for me, which I always cite back, is Biffy Clyro. Like, Biffy Clyro toured in a van for like 4 albums until they signed to a major. You know, which is 8 years of touring, and then eventually they went on to sell out like Wembley stadiums and stuff. Like, if you want to look at a band that like grafted and earned their space and will keep it, and they didn't really change their sound much. So obviously they added more like elements to it, with strings, and the production's bigger.
Improved as musicians.
And you're like, nobody does that anymore. Nobody puts in the graft to get to that point to earn it. Is they want it as fast as possible. But you need these bigger bands to kind of say, to go back to the grassroots and go, you need to see what look at this model of the way we've done it, because you can throw money at it if your dad's a millionaire and get like relatively big for a year, but you're just going to be like, if you're one of those bands, you're going to be the fruit of the day, and then all of a sudden somebody's going to be like, nah, I don't like pears anymore, I love bananas, so they're just going to be like, see you in a bit, like, bye. Then that's how like that's how the kids are, because they're like, it's nuts, because one year I can put on a band that does loads of tickets, and then we're like, oh, we'll bring them back and do a bigger venue, and they do less than they did before because they've moved on.
So just put out a stupid tweet.
Yeah, it's like the swing trends of the way certain scenes work with certain bands. It's about getting it right. I think it's that these people in bands need to join a band to make music, and not to be in a band to be in a band. Like, that's what it is. You need to focus on the art and what you're creating, and not oh, look at me, I'm in a band, I'm cool.
For sure.
Like that's, and the problem is with that, it's not really their fault. Young kids have grown up with like Snapchat and social media stuff, and everybody's on this personal PR campaign constantly, as if like anybody gives a shit about your life. Like that, and therefore that translates into when you're in a band, they see what the bigger bands are doing. Oh, Liam Gallagher's doing this, let's just copy that. And it's always like a version of trying to be somebody else.
Yeah.
And you can do that to a certain degree, but people will see through it once you get. They're just like, well, you're just doing what they're doing. Like, people aren't stupid. Like, legit music fans aren't stupid if you're copying what another band's done. Like, in terms of the way.
See through, yeah.
Yeah, like Lewis Capaldi, right? Terrible music, amazing marketing. Like, the guy, fucking fair fucks to that guy. Like, I don't know how long he's gonna last, but he'll probably make a bunch of money and then disappear.
Yeah.
But he's playing the music industry at their own game because he's a funny fucker. He's got a personality. Yeah. Like, he's playing, Noel Gallagher's slagged him off. So the minute Noel Gallagher's slagged a guy off who's not really that known, he's immediately validating him.
For sure.
And then he can then use that and walk out at Glastonbury in front of like thousands of people with dressed up as Noel Gallagher walking. Like, that stuff's priceless. But
you've got to have the right mentality. You've got to not care about music and care about fame.
Like, you can do that. There's loads of ways that we could push the venue in certain ways to do things, but I'm always... So, for example, I sit with the people that like looked after this before weren't doing it right at all. Like, when I took it over, there was maybe 4 or 5 people employed upstairs here to do these shows, and it's just like, I don't know what the fuck. I mean, they're old friends of mine, but they're like, they weren't being managed by the guy who was like running it.
Yeah.
Who was a lot older than them, but I just don't see, like, if you leave things to their own devices, they built up like 60 grand in debt, and then you come in, and I came in at 2012, but I was just hiring the venue, doing like Polar Bear Club and Wilhelm Scream and stuff still at that point.
Yeah.
So I was still doing those shows, but that wasn't my job to come in and save the venue. But Pat,
overboard.
No, yeah, Pat was like, oh, I worked at HMV as a game supervisor, and he would come in and be like, we really need help at the venue, and I was like, okay. So eventually I kind of came in, and then I had to, try and get the Vaccines to play, and Frank Turner to do 2 shows for us, and Kerouac to reform, and like we had to like get all, and I had to like, through what I had done as a DIY promoter, basically reach out to try and make this shit happen, and luckily we did. Luckily scraped by, otherwise this wouldn't be here. But then you had to like look at it as there's these other venues that are closing down, and just go, well, how can we create revenue? And why don't you make merch, limited merch? Like, every time we do merch, sells out. I'm like, boom, boom, done. And then we'll do like 50 shirts. And that's not that much money. It's like 900 quid. But 900 quid is 900 quid in like lease rent or whatever. Yeah. So that covers that for the month. And then that's one less thing to worry about. But the problem is, it's just momentum. And like, I don't know. So even teaching my younger assistant to have like initiative constantly, instead of having to be prompted for things. Yeah. Like that's what it is. But I don't know if you can teach that. I think it comes with time.
It comes with experience.
And responsibility as well. Like, if you give them enough responsibility, that they'll panic that if something doesn't get done, something fucks up.
And it's stuff that we don't get taught at school. If school was, education in general was different, and we were getting taught shit like how to do our taxes before we actually left school. If you'd got taught how to do your taxes, you'd just be a smart person all round. And I'm not just talking about just your taxes. It would like impact other areas of your life. Like, kids aren't given any kind of like anything that they need to do and finish properly, or there's a consequence, unless their parents do it.
But at the same time, kids now have these platforms to make an insane amount of money. Like, if you're like a YouTube kid, and obviously, like, I hate Fortnite, but that kid's just won like 1.3 million playing
like Fortnite. And Jen, my partner, said to me, should I stop working and just practice? And I was like, you're shit at it. And no, you shouldn't.
No, it's like, this is a thing, like, this parents are throwing this kid's Xbox in the bin, saying that he needs to focus more on school, and now his mum's like, whatever. Like, I got 1 point. He's 15. He's not even allowed that amount of money. Like, so now his parents have that money, and they can just go and buy a house and be like, this is what's best for you, Timmy. Like, I know you won the competition. Like, it's like,
play more Fortnite.
Don't play. Go outside more and engage with people.
So I guess the last thing I want to ask you, because that's very much the business side of how things can change. But I know there's a lot that individuals can be doing. Shit like actually buying beers at the venue and not buying it from the corner shop.
Yeah, we don't send them in anyway.
Good. Yeah. But I mean, not drinking them like before in the game. It's like, and Britain's got a pre-drinking culture anyway. That is very much like. But what can people be doing to actually help venues out, help the music scene?
Personally, I would just say, just like engaging with what's going on. It's easy to just listen. We have like a Spotify playlist of stuff. Problem is, people are too lazy to educate themselves and stuff. We can only like force things down people's throats to a degree, and I don't like doing it. I just don't feel like ethically that we can keep yelling at people. Yeah. You haven't come to gigs. This is your fault. Blah blah blah. Instead of doing that, you have to spin a positive and be like, "Thanks for coming. Hopefully, I'll see you again." And then this is the whole part, that the Joiners is about this big family and big community, the same as that all these venues should be in the country, that they should be creating music communities. It's just to be more of a part of it, because local bands, like if they want to play on a show, right, they ask me to play support, they don't get the support, they don't come to the show. And I'm like, why do I not see you at that show? If you want to play with that band, sure, you like them. But then they're like, oh yeah, I can't be bothered, just being apathetic. So, even the local bands need to support the other local bands. There's very few that still do it. They should go and check them out and be like, oh, they're cool, we should do some shows together. But it's all very competitive, so people need to let their guards down more and just realise this is, at this level, it's really a hobby and it's fun. You're not going to make any money that's going to change your life at this level, but people just need to, I think definitely buying drinks is a massive thing. Don't pre-drink, but I don't want to post stage times. I'm not getting to get into a slave argument here. It's just the thing, like the last modern baseball tour that ever happened, on the advancing every day it said, please do not post stage times anywhere, because they brought their friends from Philly to play with them and they want people to see them.
Of course.
Like, so they're like, get to the fucking venue like half an hour after it opens, watch stuff, and half the time the support band's better than the headline. I know I shouldn't be saying that, but a lot of time it is.
But that should be the point.
And then you can have that. Something. You can take those scene points home, put them into your Switch, and do whatever. I don't know. Like, turn them into coins.
No, but I agree.
You just need to. I just think people need to be more conscious of what their towns would look like without that space. Like, imagine removing it from this equation. So if this wasn't here, I wouldn't be in this city anymore. I would have gone ages ago. Like, what else is there? There's like a shopping centre, like there is everywhere else, with the same shops. There's no independence in this city really at all. There's a couple of cool bars, and there's obviously like Heartbreakers, which is cool, but you can only go there a certain amount of times. But then there's places like the Shooting Stars, cool. I always try to lean on like the independent places, businesses that people should support, because they have individualism and they're run by good people. But if those places go, not that we even have that many, like look at Brighton, it has like 100-fold on what we have. But yeah, just like, I don't know, it's hard. It's as much as you try and tell people, I'm not trying to tell them what to do. This is the problem. People hate people tell them what to do. It's like I encourage people to just turn their heads a little more. This is like when we do like last year, the 50th anniversary, it was so hard to get these bands to come back and do anything. Like the agents don't want it. Why would they want to do that? And then if I like know the band, I can hit them up and they're like, okay, cool, we'll do something. So like then the Shikari thing took like a year of going back and forth, and then they were in Japan, it was like 2 a.m, and their manager and they're like, yeah, okay, we're going to do this.
That's
it's
ridiculous.
Like, you know, so it's...
I used to live next door to one. I used to clean their windows. Cleaning around in St Albans.
But then how many heads that turn? Normal heads. I'm talking about like mainstream heads. That turn by them playing here is amazing. But this is why aren't these people just turning their heads and being like, oh, what's going on anyway? Because you get responses on the internet going like, I didn't even realise the Joiners were still open. I was like, but that's your choice. That's your choice. I see that shit and I'm just like, oh, fuck off. Like,
it's an inundation of information. People got Facebook, and what we should have done...
Fake busy. That's what's the inundation of everyone pretending they're too busy. Like,
what we should have
I've
done...
got to watch the whole of Stranger Things in one day. It's like, have you? Have you really got to sit and watch 8 hours of Netflix in one day? Like, it will still be there when you get home.
And they didn't follow it. Like, there wasn't a learning curve. There wasn't a period of going, right, we've got Facebook. We should probably follow the joiners and the restaurant I go to. And no, it was like, I can follow celebrities, right? I followed 100 celebrities. Now I'm never going to see what joiners post, even if I have followed them. Like, it's too easy to be bombarded with shit. And something that I always say to people is, you need to think about when you're older. I like the concept of sitting around with mates when I'm 60, 70, 80, and I want it to be mates who are into music and that we haven't fucked each other over just to get a tour. That we haven't gone, oh yeah, I'll book you a tour if you book me a tour, and then not book them a tour and never talk to them again. That kind of shit, competition between people, isn't future-proofing anyway for our own happiness or for the music scene.
Not at all, no.
So,
and I'm always willing to like help. I love new promoters, like, and it really upsets me when they come in here and they lose money and then they quit.
Yeah,
like they lose like one show money, because I did 4 years of losing money, right? And I, like, living on like no food and doing whatever until I started making money. And that's the whole graft thing. That's not just for bands, it's for promoters or any creative industry you go into, whether it's like movies, art, like whatever you're doing, you're gonna have to work for years before you start being like getting your kudos and earning your stripes. And that's just the way it is, because there's all these other people ahead of you. And all of my friends that are successful in those industries have done the same thing. Nobody's going to knock on your door and give you a contract for £500,000.
That's literally like, Luke Hodson. I talked to him from Awesome Merch, and the thing he said was like all the musicians I know have actually done well have worked their asses off. Like the ones that I like that are good, and all the businesses that have done well have worked their asses off. Like, stop. And
being nice as well. Like even like, you know, those architects guys are still nice people. Like, they're down to earth, genuine people, and their tour managers rad. Like, there's all the nice thing goes so far in the music industry, because London is just full of incestuous industry wankers. And as much as people like to label me one, I'm not. I'm nowhere near like the level of these fucks. Like, this, it just blows my mind. But yeah, I don't know. I hope that everything will work itself out eventually. And if venues do close down for the music scenes to have to be better, then so be it. It is what it is. But the way, that's not their fault. It's the way the music industry structured now has changed. So why would people want to go and play in Leamington Spa and places like that when they can just do the main cities? The thing is that I say to people is that they complain when tours get announced and everyone goes, why no Southampton or whatever, on Twitter or blah. And we're always trying to educate people through the joiners medium and social media and be like, look, if you want people to come to Southampton, your scene has to be better. The bands want to play where the music scenes are the best. Why would they come to a half-filled show when they can go to one that's sold out in a different city? Like, you introduce your friends to more music, you know, get them involved in some way. And then if the show's around, more bands will want to come and play in the best places.
There's bands from the UK that don't want to play the UK at all. That would rather just go to Germany.
Because they get
Germany
after,
and you get a line after the fucking gig to buy merch when they've never even heard of your name.
No.
They'd like hand you money over. They're like, oh, it's a £5. Here's a £10.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Like, seriously?
Yeah, because that culture still exists there. Like, you know, especially for punk music, it's huge in the mainland. Like, over here, it's dead on its ass. Like, it's the whole. It's just wild. Like, even that, I did for that thing on my Instagram a couple of months. Bad Religion brought a new record out, and it was like number 10 in the Billboard charts in the US, number 30 something in Germany, and number 121 in the UK. And it's like, why even fucking put that? Like, why even list it? And I was just like,
fuck you, UK.
Punk's not dead.
You have Black Sabbath. Jack shit now.
There are 121 albums out at any one time in the UK. It's like, come on, man. Like, don't, just leave it alone. It's I don't know. It's an odd thing, but I have faith still in musicians and people being nice and there being growth and pushing people as far as you can with their talent, like and making them have self-belief. It's like a massive thing, because there's so much doom and gloom in this industry, and there's so much precedent of, oh, you must do this in order to get this or acquire this or do this, but there's like bands like Black Midi who just kind of came out, did their thing. I know they're from like a music school and they're fucking amazing, but they kept everything, no music online, no social media, just put these like weird 8-bit videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
And their shows like sell out everywhere based on their musical merit. But who's the last bands to do that based on musical merit? Everything's like, you know, oh, they're cool, or their image is this. And that's the whole, that's what the idea is now, that kids don't just want the music, they want something to go with it. And those bands tend to do the best, that there has to be like something that runs alongside it. But for me, that's awesome, because the music, if the music doesn't have direct message in it, at least it means something. And it's not just
artistically, for sure.
And it's not, well, it's so easy to create those mediums of like video. You can get a fucking high-end DSLR or whatever for like no money, and you can like do these, you can make things more interesting than just, oh, this is the music and this is the lyrics.
And that was done on stage for a long time. Like I think back to the music that really inspired me to get into punk, and it was stuff like Dave Bowie, and like people were doing stuff like that on stage.
This is the whole point, that people come to these shows and they meet like their wife to be, they meet their best friends, they socialize, and then they're in this medium of being taken away for 2 hours. They're being dropped into a different world, and they're not worrying about their bills they've got to pay. They're not worrying about the shit with their parents pissing them off at home. They're not worrying about the fact their car's just blown up. This is the escapism, but the escapism isn't in your pocket on a screen.
No,
it's in places like this, and that's that. People need to value that a lot more, and I think they will eventually. But they're just being, you know, told all the time what to do or what's good, or I don't know. This is the on-demand culture. The whole thing of like, imagine you're 16 and you can either go out and spend like 20 quid at a show, or you can stay indoors, watch a TV show, a film, have a guy on a bike drive McDonald's to your house. You don't even have to go to McDonald's to get McDonald's now. Like you can
like in the States, you get weed delivered by a droid.
On-demand lifestyle. I want to listen to that new band's record immediately. 1 minute past 12, it's come out, but it's on it in front of you. You don't even have to get up. Like the only thing you have to ever do now is even computer games. If you're a lazy fuck and you want to pay like 20 quid more in the PlayStation store, you can get it as soon as it comes out.
I think it's going to be the death of, like I've said, it's going to, for me, it's going to go one of two ways, and I think there's going to be a big clash in it. I think it's going to get to the point where the big gigs are going to be live streamed, and you're going to just be able to pay, and it already happens with festivals and stuff. You pay and you can just watch it from your.
Bullshit. They shouldn't allow that to happen.
But it is.
I get it if it's a sold out event, right, in advance. I totally agree with doing that.
For sure.
Like, I agree with doing that, but we've had several stream companies come to us and say we can stream your shows and blah blah. I was like, no, man. I want people in the venue like. It's experiencing it, like feeling the music without sounding like you know, ridiculous. Without I didn't find the fucking tone.
To Giles, he was like, it lifts you up. Like when you're in a venue and you get the vibrations through your body, and, and your hair stands on end, and you listen.
There's something super epic, and and the thing is, you're only ever going to see that particular performance of that artist in that moment. Yeah, it's never ever going to be exactly the same unless it's Britney Spears and it's on a backing track or.
2008 was my first gig here, and it was Kevin Devine came. I did a full band. He did a full band one, and I remember chatting to their drummer after, because I was street teaming for Kevin Devine. So I got to meet Kevin Devine, which was really cool at the time. But his drummer was like, "Oh, it's awesome because he's just got this sound effects pedal, and he's just gone from being like a really mediocre guitarist to being a really great guitarist." And I was like, "You can't be saying that to a kid who's just paid money to go watch Kevin Devine. He's a really mediocre guitarist."
He's a great human, Kevin Devine.
Yeah, such a cool dude.
Yeah.
Well, dude, I think that we have way gone over time and had a great conversation. So, thank you very much, dude.
It's okay, thank you.
And not just for the conversation, for what you do with the venue as well, because music means a lot to me. The gigs that I've come that you've put on mean a lot to me. And
you're still here, and this is your creative output, and this is the wonderful thing about being able to do, you know, different shit and talk to people. Get into bands when we get to the Guildhall size.
Thank you so much for checking out that episode of Promote the Hell Out of It. I really hope you enjoyed it, because I really loved talking to Ricky Bates. He does so much for the music scene, and I hope that the conversation has encouraged you to help in any way that you can, to go to gigs, to tell other people about gigs that are happening locally, to tell other people about new small bands that you've discovered, because it will really help to keep the music scene alive. If you did enjoy that episode, please give us a like, give us a follow, give us a review. It all depends where you're listening from. And an episode that I would recommend listening to if you enjoyed this one is episode number 1 with Sean McGowan. We actually mentioned Ricky Bates in it because he's worked at the Joiners as well. So yeah, hopefully get in touch. I'd love to hear from you, and chat soon.
People will get into bands when they get to the Guildhall size. So when they're on a national playing field,